first thing is, for the sediment filter, you have to shut the intake off by turning this. And it's very easy to know if it's off because it'll be perpendicular to the pipe. If it's parallel to the pipe running up and down, that means it's on. If it's perpendicular to the pipe, that means it's off, and that works in general with gas and water, etc. But that's off, and then we have to shut this one off. This one is where it flows out to. This needs to be shut off too. And so now water going in and water going out is shut off to this filter. And that'll save us from having to take the air out of most of the pipe if we don't do that. Okay, next thing is grab yourself a bucket. You're gonna need it. And we need to release the pressure. And so, helps with 2 people, but I only have myself today. But you'd have your bucket underneath, and then there's this little red button that if you hold that down, water and air is gonna start coming out of that. And that's okay, that's normal. And it's just gonna flow right down to your bucket, and just do that until it stops flowing out. And then you can start releasing the big blue, and I'll show you how to do that. And now I'm gonna grab this tool here. It'll be hanging up right there. And you just basically slide this little tool up here. And you're going to turn the this here, and you're gonna have to use one hand to turn it, and then one hand down here to hold the base. And then you turn it like that, and you don't need this tool anymore. And you're basically gonna unscrew this, and make sure you hold the bottom with one hand as you unscrew it like this, because it's very heavy. This thing is full of water, and so you don't want to dump the water everywhere. So you got to balance it with one hand here and one hand here as you're unscrewing it, because it's going to be heavy as a bowling ball when it comes down off of this base here. And so you just want to make sure it doesn't tip over, because all that water is going to spill out all over and you don't want to mess. So just have your bucket ready. When I started unscrewing it, I got about 3/4 of the way unscrewed, and it just started pouring out water. And so you want to keep your bucket underneath it, so that when you get to 3/4, you can just let it just do its thing, let it drain the water out, and then keep going from there. So just show you how this works. So when you go to pour it out into your bucket, that's what came out of it. But you have this O-ring. You're going to want to place your finger like this when you pour it out, so you don't lose the O-ring in the bucket, or you're going to have to put your hand in that slime and get that O-ring out. But you can see that this filter is definitely done for. It's caked over pretty good. It did its job though. Definitely took out a lot of sediment, but definitely time to replace it. And you can see inside here it's pretty nasty. So basically that needs to be rinsed out. So the best way to do that is with a hose. But you can use this one. This is the one I was referring to. That's also runs from the well. So you can hook up a hose to that. There's a green hose here, but they're definitely not long enough. So I would get a bigger hose, clean this up outside. And I want to show you something here. This O-ring here, I noticed it's cut. I did that intentionally because they say they're supposed to, every time you're supposed to change these, you're supposed to put a new O-ring on. But I've purchased O-rings for this before, and no matter, it seems like what kind you get, they're always too big, and they're too wide, or too long, I should say, and so they kind of hang off and you're not going to get in there. But also something that happens, I noticed every time I change this, these O-rings stretch out, and you'll notice this one I just took off. If you were to put it in its track completely, you got an extra little bit there, so that's going to have to be cut off, or it's not even going to be, you're not going to be able to fit that in, because you can see what happens when you do that. So just grab a pair of scissors, trim it down just a tiny bit because want you don't want a leak in your seal here, so you have to trim it down just a very tiny bit, a little bit beyond what it would fit in there, and then you can finagle a little bit, pushing it back, and it'll fit in there. So, also another thing to note is when you put this back in here, you have to re-grease it. And I just use this Luby film, found it on Amazon. It's just basically a food grade, like silicone almost. And you can see it's non-toxic, odorless, tasteless, and it has to be food grade because people might be drinking it, using this to cook and everything. But you just take some huge globs and re-lubricate your O-ring, stick it back in, and you're good to go. So it's just simple. You just take that, hold that filter in, pour the water out, take your old filter in. You can see that the new one's over there. Stick your new one back in, put your O-ring back on, stick it back in the housing right there, and tighten it up just a little bit. The key with these is you don't have to crank when you screw it back in. You use these little keys here, and you don't have to tighten it too much. You just give it a little nudge to make it sure it's snug, but you don't want to over tighten these. Turn your water back on, you'll be good to go.